Hello and welcome to Diminishing Returns! Netflix are dropping their American adaptation of the Death Note manga series this week, so we thought we'd have a look at the anime series and previous film adaptations. As always, happy listening.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode of Diminishing Returns. I'm Alan, and I'm here with Calvin.
Hello.
And Sol.
Hello.
To discuss this week's film of choice, or rather series of choice in this case, because we're looking at Death Note, the anime series, and there are film spin-offs of it. It comes from a manga originally, I understand. Well, yeah, I mean, Sol's going to be the man of information in this one because he's got more of the background knowledge on it than we have. In fact,
which is
me
weird,
and Calvin have both come into this one pretty blind, coming at it beforehand. So, Sol, do you want to give us a bit of backstory?
Yeah, I mean, I should be very clear. I'm not a big super fan of Death Note in the sense that, you know, I didn't watch it in high school and read all the mangas and things like, you know, a certain type of kid did. I only watched it for the first time like last year, but you know, I know a lot of people speak very highly of it, and I thought I'd finally give it a try, and it just so happens that I came to this one before you guys, I guess, and I think it's brilliant, which is very high praise from me because we've touched on this before, but I tend to not get on very well with anime.
Yeah, I suggest anyone listening to this who hasn't listened to our Ghosts in the Shell episode, go back and listen to that to get a gauge of sort of where you stand when it comes to anime. Because it's not from a terribly positive position.
Yeah.
But every now and then something will penetrate, and you know, you're an Attack on Titan fan as well, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, you got me to sit down and watch that, and it's good. I enjoy it. And I mean, it was partly that, I think. I was looking through what was on Netflix. This was on there. I knew it was meant to be very good. It just happened to be the next one out of the shows that I knew the name of. I mean, there's so many anime series that I don't really know anything about, but I just know they're very highly regarded. Things like Full Metal Alchemist or Fruit Basket or something, is it called? Like, I don't know what they are. And I didn't know anything about Death Note. I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know what to expect whatsoever. I just put it on a whim, and it is... I was hooked really early on. It did a remarkable job of getting my interest, grabbing me in a way that TV drama rarely does, let alone foreign anime TV drama. So
for you, Saul, I admit, like, I've only seen 6 episodes of the series so far. I'm really enjoying it. I will continue with it. But just from watching those first 6 episodes, it does strike me as a very you sort of thing, because it's so,
really?
Well, it's so logical and methodical, and it's like, you like things where, like, concepts where, like,
You're
scientists will get a zombie in a room or whatever, and it's like, because I think you really like, even when they go to the commercial breaks and they have, like, a little fact, like, the Death Note has 44 minutes to... I think you like that.
I don't know if
it's
I
like
do,
every time someone comes up with a plan, they immediately tell you, like, all the, you know, I've thought of this and I've thought of that and I've done all this and this and that kind of thing, and this is why it's foolproof and all this kind of stuff.
It's interesting that you say that, because I think you're right, actually. I hadn't put that together, but I don't particularly love the exposition and the endless rules and regulations as to how the thing works. I don't know if I necessarily care for that. I think that's the
stuff I thought you'd love.
I think there's maybe a few too many rules to the point that it just starts to feel a bit silly. But I do love the plans and the degree of logic with which every character just puts the perfect plan into action to kind of outsmart the other guys, and then they come up with I do love that, and so it does kind of, and I love watching them dance within those rules that are set. I just think that maybe there's as I say, maybe a few rules too many, certainly as the show progresses and keeps adding rules and rules and rules. It's to the point, actually, I watched the most recent live-action film last night in preparation of this, and at the start, one of them, speaking to a Shingami, says how many rules for the Death Note are there, and they just sort of go, oh, not even Shingami know that, and they just walk off, and it's like, okay, so they can just keep adding them in as long as they want. But
so we should probably explain what Shingami is. And,
yes. Yeah.
And all this. What's the premise in a nutshell?
I should add, before going into that in too much detail, the subtitles that I was watching last night, they were official subtitles. They refer to the Shingami as Reapers. There was no effort to kind of sell them as anything other than just a Western concept of a Reaper, and it recontextualized the whole thing when I was watching it, really, because it's like, oh yeah, I guess they kind of are just a different spin on. Well, no, I know they are. I thought they were kind of a Japanese take on the Grim Reaper, but sort of a distinctly different thing with a bit more backstory and ideas being drawn upon. I mean, put it this way: you can look up Shingami on Wikipedia, and it has its own page separate from Grim Reaper. But yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, the premise is there is a book. You can write someone's name in the book; it will kill them like magically. That's it, really, and it's just how that affects people, and there's obviously more to it than that. But that is the
in this story, a particular character called Light, who is a 17-year-old boy who's very smart. He gets hold of this book, and he decides that what he's going to do with it is use it for the greater good and kill criminals.
Yeah, he's appointing himself judge, jury, and executioner, and deciding who should live and who should die to cleanse the planet of evil is his plan. But obviously, I mean, one thing I love this show for is it really does. It gets into ethical arguments pretty heavily, and it doesn't like.
Can I dispute that? Because one of the things I didn't like about this was that it didn't do enough of that for me. It kind of gives it lip service, but then doesn't quite go down that road, and it becomes much more about this personal battle, which I found very engaging and interesting. But I felt like it didn't have that kind of deeper layer that it probably needed.
Yeah, I mean,
because it does kind of it suggests as if we're gonna get it, and then it never quite came to fruition for me.
I suppose what I'm saying is it never really asks you to go with the protagonist as your hero. He's always very much a kind of anti-hero, and you're not really
he's
sure.
very much an anti-hero.
Yeah, and you're not really sure if you're meant to be on his side or the character of L, who is kind of the series antagonist. He's sort of the villain of the piece, and yet he's kind of the hero of the piece at the same time. It's quite an unusual guy, it's quite an unusual dynamic. And it's not that he's just a good guy. He is championed as a hero within the show, and yet he's still positioned and used as a villain. It's quite odd.
I don't know. It depends on your definition of justice, I suppose. Like, I think, I mean, we're all probably against capital punishment and don't think that criminals should be put to death, but I could imagine that there is an audience out there that would see it from Light's perspective.
I think that it's presented to us as such that we're supposed to see it from his perspective, but we are supposed to question it. And it's never given as a clear look, this is what was supposed to be happening. And Japan does have the death penalty, actually, for certain crimes. So it's not quite like the idea of people being killed for crimes is not completely out of the question, which I feel like it probably is for us a little bit more. But he is killing people who have all sorts of crimes.
But, they are given like a fair trial, and he gets very lax with what does and doesn't constitute death as well. You know, that's kind of the. And I mean, I suppose what I'm saying is I like that it doesn't shy away from taking its characters to dark places, and you're not necessarily expected to go with them. So it's not that it necessarily explores the ethical implications so much as it just lets its characters be evil, and you're not exactly meant to be on their side. Even though
I think this is one of the few things I've seen where you are dealing with essentially the super villain. Really, he is killing people, and the good guys, the police, are trying to catch him, and we are seeing everything from his perspective, and we go with it, and we support him for a long way because of the plot rather than our own feelings. And I don't think you see that very often. Like, normally an anti-hero means, he's like got a heart of gold, but he's a smuggler, like, but he still gets the girl's heart, and he does a lot for orphanages and stuff like that. Yeah, but this guy, he is, and like as we go along, he has to do things for commits all sorts of acts that he probably wouldn't even have thought of himself that he would have done. He gets pushed to extremes.
And it's beyond that as well, because even on a low stakes human level, he is horribly manipulative, and the way he treats some, the character, I don't think you'll have got up to when the love interest is introduced, will you, Calvin? But
Misa.
He is horribly manipulative of her, and takes massive advantage of her, not to mention his family and people.
So you've led me on to a much bigger point I want to deal with here, which is the representation of women in Death Note, which is it's one of the worst representations of women I've seen in many, many years. I don't know if the Japanese are as woke as we are when it comes to feminism. And when was this made? 2006?
Yeah.
If this was made in the 70s, I would have thought, well, that's a bit rough, isn't it? But to say this was made in 2006, I really can't quite believe it, to be honest.
Two prominent female characters, aren't there? One of whom doesn't make it very far through the series, but the one early on is a perfectly strong, powerful woman, isn't she?
No. Do you mean... Well, Calvin will know about this bit. Calvin, have you had an FBI agent in your...
Yes.
So what happened?
Well, he's investigating Light, and then he's killed quite ingeniously, and then his girlfriend or wife, fiance, right? Yeah, she was also an FBI agent, but retired.
Why did she quit? She quit because she was getting married to him, so she doesn't need a job anymore.
Oh, right. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, right. Yeah, sorry. I thought I might have missed
that's
something.
A cultural thing, isn't it? I mean,
they're supposed to be American. Well, he is.
Yeah, I know. It's not very. They're not very good at portraying Americans throughout the series, as you see later on as well.
But my point is that she is probably like the kind of most intelligent female character in the whole thing. As in, she seems the most sort of solid.
But other than that,
got it together kind of.
That she's quitting her job because she's getting married.
No, because she said he's like going, "Oh, I'm investigating this case," and she's like, "Oh, well, maybe this will help." And he's like, "Come on, love, you've retired. Just make me dinner, and then we'll have sex, and you can have some babies, and just keep your little mouth shut." And that's basically what he says to her. And then she's like, when he dies, she's like, "Okay, I'm going to investigate now," and we get that set up for about half an episode, and then she's just killed. So like that disappears straight away. Like there's no point to any of that. But yeah, I mean, and that's probably the best representation of women. It was terrible. I mean, I think there is a cultural difference, obviously, but that was just jumped out at me so much. And there's not many women in it at all.
I was going to say that there's basically one female character in the overall story, and that is Misa Amani, and I don't really know. Because I do really like her character, and I do find her very interesting, and I think it's partly because it's one of those things where there's nothing necessarily sexist about it happening once. It's one of those things that if it's every character, so you never really see this sort of a character anymore, and I think that's part of why I found it so interesting, because essentially she is just like a fucking mental girl who's obsessed with a boy, and
but they all are, because every girl who meets Light wants to shag him. His sister's mental. She's just like a stupid little girl, and the only other woman in it who is like his mother. She's just a good little housewife.
But they don't really have any character at all, do they? I mean, it's just, I think the idea is that Light is so incredibly handsome and clever and manipulative that he just somehow has people flocking to him. I mean, the most of the men are portrayed in the same way towards what's the name, aren't they? It's just that there's more male characters that are given the time to actually be proper characters. I think it's more of an issue of representation, or not representation, proportions of female to male characters on screen rather than...
Doctor Who's a woman now, Alan. I don't know what you're complaining about.
But the thing is that you're right. Misa Amani is like... There's an argument to be had, certainly, that she's a real like throwback to... You wouldn't find this character in most modern media, because she is just like... She's a model, and... I mean, not stupid, but she is a bit like unhinged in that very kind of 1970s portrayal of a woman way. But at the same time, I mean, he manipulates the hell out of her. He's not like, I don't know, it kind of works within the framework of he needs someone who is easy for him to use and play like that. Like I say, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with having that character if it's one person within a well-balanced world, but it's the only woman who's given.
Well, the fact that is the only woman in the show, does that not is that not a problem either? It was like, I don't want to make too big a deal about it because I enjoyed the show, and like I'm trying to appreciate it from a different cultural background where it is more of a kind of the woman has her place, the man has his place kind of thing still. So not that I know much about Japanese culture, to be honest. But I think they're a little bit kind of behind the curve on that and that element. So I'm willing to sort of go with it, but I was just dumbstruck by it for the most part because I just couldn't believe how strongly they were playing it.
So I guess, yeah, if you are listening and you haven't seen it or anything, we'll try and tread as lightly as possible with regards to spoilers. But just to kind of broadly set it up a bit more, the show basically opens in this Shingami, this Grim Reaper realm. We see these death gods just going about their business, not really doing anything. But the idea is that they write human names in these books that they have, death notes, and they can choose to write a time of death if they wish. They can choose to write a cause of death if they wish. If they don't, the person will just die in 30 seconds, is it? From a heart attack? 40 seconds. Basically, just because he's bored, one of the Shingami just chucks the book down to earth and lets a human pick it up just to kind of give himself something to do for a few years because he's just been up there for eternity getting bored. And that's when the protagonist of the series, Light, comes in, who finds the book. It lands just by him. You can't see a Shingami unless you touch the relevant death note. So when he picks it up, he is then able to see Ryuk, who is the Shingami in question.
Who is a very probably the reason why I put off watching this series for so long is that design of that character is so terrifying. When you eventually get into the show, it's really, I mean, when you see a still image of it, I think it's quite scary. But then when you in the series, when you get to know the character a bit more, it becomes less.
It's very benevolent, isn't it? It's quite friendly, really.
Well,
I thought you were going to say how I felt, which is I put off watching it for so long because I'd seen so many instances of that character on backpacks with Ramones badges and stuff, and just like I just thought, oh god.
Oh, I'd just be terrified whenever I saw it. I think it's the unblinking eyes. It's a lot, but this character comes into the series, and he's kind of. I mean, I really like him. I mean, in the episodes that I've seen so far, he sounds like he's more of a sounding board for Light than anything else. He's like someone for Light to talk to, and he's just sort of because he's really bored, and that's why he drops his death note into Earth because he's like, I'm really bored, and I've seen all this stuff. No one's interesting anymore. No, there's no, spice to my life. And then he meets this Light, and he's kind of impressed by him, and sort of like, oh, whoa, you're sick. Like, I kind of love this, and I'm gonna stick around. And
they have a really interesting dynamic throughout the series because he's not exactly a friend. He's more of a neutral party and more of a neutral observer, and he's quite like explicit about that. He'll frequently say like, oh yeah, like I'm not gonna like help you out here. I'm just gonna kind of sit back and watch. I'll give you information if about how the thing works, but I'm not, for example, going to carry out plans on your behalf or kill people if they're threatening you or anything like that. And towards the end, he gets a bit more involved with bits and bobs. Like there is an episode quite early on where he warns Light that someone's following him just because he's a bit weirded out by it. So it's not like a hard and fast rule, but he is much more of a neutral observer than you'd expect from this kind of thing. I think if this had been written by almost anyone else, it would have been like, right, we're allies, I'm going to help you in your quest or something like that. And it's quite interesting the way it works.
Can I give you my broad strokes about how I felt about it?
Yeah.
And I did generally enjoy the show. But basically very early on, probably by episode 3 even, I was already feeling like, I don't know how this is going to stretch to 37 episodes, because
I've been
it's
having
essentially,
that same feeling.
I mean, the 20-minute episode, so it's basically a 12-hour thing. And I was less than an hour in, and I was going, this feels like I'm an hour into a 2-hour film, so what's going to happen? Yeah. And then I thought, I bet there's going to be a lot of padding and stretching in this, and I think that's basically what it proved to be. And without giving too much away, there's definitely a couple of points where it's like, oh, this is the ending. Why is there still 14 episodes left? So there's definitely points where I felt like I watched 3 series here, with sort of some central characters following through.
I do agree to a point. I don't know if I'd say stretching, but so much as extending, maybe artificially extending. I know it's basically the same thing.
What's the difference?
They're not padding it so much as they are needlessly adding in new elements and avenues to explore. It's not like they're just stretching out the story they're telling so much as they're tacking on extra bits to prolong.
Well, to be honest, my response to that is I'm looking forward to watching the film, like the 110-minute version of this, because I think this story, the central story, could be told quite well.
I agree.
Within that time.
Not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but obviously there's 4 live-action Japanese films that are made based on the same manga series that I've seen, and I'll get to those in a bit, I suppose. And obviously there's also the American version that's coming out that we're recording this to tie in with. I really love it. I love any kind of Machiavellian game of wits sort of playing out like this.
To sort of make it clear that it becomes this cat and mouse game between Light, who's like the person killing everyone, and Elle, who is like this eccentric Sherlock Holmes type investigator. Yeah. And they become so kind of interconnected with each other, and it all becomes very Machiavellian, and kind of there's so many bluffs and double bluffs, and they're lying to other people, but it all works. It all makes sense. It all comes together, and so that bit works really well. And the bits between those two are what kept me going, really. But then, because she's so much dealing with this conflict between the two of them, you kind of lose this grander concept of, oh, I'm killing people I am justifying why I'm killing these people. I'm going to become a god in a brand new world and all this sort of thing. But I preferred the bit about them, so I didn't mind all that getting forgotten.
Yeah.
But it did make me think, when they're just sort of dealing with each other, and you kind of like, you feel like, oh, I know you're doing it, but how do I prove it? And how do I stop you? And all this. I figured this is just an episode of Columbo, isn't it? Isn't it? Because in Columbo, he always knows who's done it. Like, he just has to hang around with them and annoy them until they admit it.
Yeah. I mean, I will agree to a point. For me, the show kind of peaked in episode 7.
That's my next episode. Oh, great!
But
I really enjoy the stuff that comes. I'm kind of on board with them extending it and making it, take up a bit longer.
I mean,
just because I enjoy it so much along the way. But I agree.
I didn't quite enjoy it enough to really justify it. And there's a definite point, which I won't be too specific about for Calvin's sake, that I should have stopped watching. Like that would have been my ending. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
There's a couple of points you could be talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, exactly. Yeah, but even that point. But I mean, I did watch all this within a few days. I really binged it, and I don't think that helps.
I went through a similar thing to you, where I kept thinking, how can this possibly sustain another 20, 15, 10 episodes? It feels like it's going to finish next episode. It feels like it's going to come to blows and boil over, and then they'd introduce a new element, and I generally was like, oh fuck, amazing. And I don't know, that for me, that isn't a bad thing. I had the same exact thing with Breaking Bad. I remembered thinking, like, when I was watching that show, how can this possibly last another 4 seasons, 3 seasons, whatever? Like, and it wasn't a bad thing. It was just that, if anything, for me, I like that, because if a show feels like it can sustain more than, a few episodes, then it isn't tense enough. If it feels like the entire game's going to be up any minute and the character's going to be caught out, then
I could easily have lost 18 episodes of Breaking Bad without any problems. So
yeah, I'm the same.
There are some pretty sort of saggy middle bits in some of those series. Yeah,
I wouldn't say 18. I could maybe lose maybe about 5.
I've one more sort of slight complaint I have to make, I suppose, was that you got this L character who has this, like a Sherlock Holmes kind of character. He works out everything on logic and evidence and intuition, but then and he doesn't let emotion come into it and all that sort of thing. But then you're dealing with something that is paranormal and you don't know what the rules of that are. And so when they're trying to ascribe logic to it, it doesn't quite feel right. And what I didn't like about those earlier episodes was that he was just working everything out too quickly. It was just like, oh, well, this is... He obviously needs to see their face and know their name. It was like, well, that just came too quickly for me.
Yeah,
I thought that was all set up very nicely. I thought that was good. They were setting traps for each other. I thought it was good cat and mouse stuff.
But that's it. I wanted to see a bit more struggle before we got to that. And like, if you were going to extend the story, then that's where I think the beginning could have been extended. That's why I got to episode 3 and I was like, oh, right, I'm an hour into an hour and 40-minute film here. What's going on?
I see where you're coming from. I kind of agree.
And just that kind of problem with trying to ascribe logic and reason to something that is without of our world. It's like, how can you do that? Because there could be any sort of variables you don't understand, which is just as much as like, oh, a Shinigami suddenly decides he's going to kill someone instead, or he's just said, oh yeah, there's a new rule I didn't tell you about before. You don't like to then make that hold on logic is difficult for me. And so I mean, it works. It all makes sense within the context of the thing, but that was kind of
You know what bothers me about the character?
That he eats all the time.
No, that's...
That he looks exactly the same as other anime characters.
Oh, sorry. Oh.
No, that he's like how old is he? It's like
17, 18.
It feels a bit like A-level cops.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
It's just unnecessary to make them both high school level. Like, it just have him be a grown man. Like, for God's sake, the main character's in high school. Isn't that enough?
Well, I think the reason is that they're mirroring each other to an extent. They're both sort of these super intelligent, but when he goes to university, that felt a bit too on the nose for me. I know what you mean.
It's
but
that,
they make it work
idea
because
that
of the relationship they develop.
Is so highly regarded and trusted within the police force, despite only being like, well, what is he, teenage? I
guess he's supposed to be 18, 17.
Yeah, it's just that. It's a bit of a leap for me, but it's not enough to stop me from going with it and enjoying the show. And if that's one of my biggest complaints, then hats off to them. To be honest,
what I like about it is that it doesn't feel like anybody's safe. Like you feel like any of these characters could be killed. It's like
I
there's
really
a sort of couple
that
of
about it.
Yeah, like in most shows, you've got a core of main characters, whereas with this, you've got a couple, obviously, but you feel like
some of them do.
Happen.
I guess spoilers. Some of them don't make it to the end out of the core characters,
and you kind of you're aware that with Lights, even with someone who's an ally, he might just decide to turn on them.
Yeah.
Like his own father is part of the investigative force. And so all the time I'm thinking, oh God, at some point maybe he's going to have to like make that ultimate decision to kill his father, or the father's going to find out and he's going to try and kill him. Or especially the father is like, oh, great honor, I'll kill my son if he turns out to be the killer kind of thing. And it's all right, is that going to come to something? And it could do. You never know, like who's going to get killed, which is great. That's obviously good in a show.
Yeah, I agree, and yeah.
Plus, they don't really skimp on the killing. Like, you don't see a lot of it because it's all kind of criminals being killed, criminals on the news. But like, there's just thousands and thousands of people being killed because it just keeps going.
A lot of criminals.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess just to keeping listeners who haven't seen it informed, that is essentially it. He decides to cleanse the world of evil by killing them. So, basically, he tests the book. He doesn't believe it's real by watching a news report. Someone's taken some people hostage. So he's got the guy. You need to see their face so that you can picture their face when you're writing their name. You need their real name. So he can see the guy, writes his name, and then the guy dies of a heart attack and the hostages are saved. And that's kind of the turning point where he's like, wow, I can do something with this. And he then just basically watches the news and scours for reports of criminal activity and picks them off one by one.
But then it becomes clear that you can actually, within a certain time, you can specify the method of death if it isn't a heart attack. And that means that you can actually manipulate a person for, is it like 44 minutes before they die?
Seconds, isn't it?
But yeah, I mean, essentially, if you say this person's going to walk to this street and then jump in front of a car, they'll walk to that street and jump in front of a car. Like that sort of thing. That you have a certain level
that is reliant on a car being there, and if they walk to that street and there's no cars there, they will just die of a heart attack. So it's kind of within the realms of what they can feasibly do.
Yeah, if you say they're gonna fly to Rome and die there, like that might not be feasible. Like they can't.
And you're right. This is stuff that I really enjoy, Calvin. This sort of logic thing, because the character makes a point of testing, like, to what extent he can push this when he discovers he can do it.
Yeah, and that's in one of the very early episodes where he writes, like, there are these 3 criminals that die in very unusual ways, and it's because he sort of wrote, like, this one is gonna, like, die by jumping from the Eiffel Tower or whatever, and obviously the criminal couldn't get out that way, so he just died of a heart attack and that kind of stuff. And when I was seeing all that, I thought, oh, this is so up Soul Street. Because I remember the episode that kind of changed it for you with Attack on Titan, when you weren't enjoying it all that much to start with. The episode that changed for you was the one where the scientists get one of the giants in a room and just start experimenting on it and testing it, and then you
know what it is?
After that episode.
I really like exposition. That's basically it. But yeah, and I love it. Yeah, I love scientist characters as well. I mean, I think that's part of it. You give me a good scientist character who's examining the monster,
or someone who's methodical, or I don't know, experimenting, logical thinker. I don't know. And then throughout the whole of that, you've got Ryuk being very impressed with what Light is doing, and he's just sort of like, oh yeah, okay, that's clever then. Yeah, fair enough.
I really liked Ryuk as well. Yeah, it's like he's just in the background laughing at, like, and just like he is just a casual observer. But yeah, he's a really cool character.
I'm actually reading the manga now out of interest. I'm only sort of 1 volume in, but it is a very faithful adaptation. I think anime series tend to be almost, just animate the book basically. But, I mean, one thing I'll say is the pacing feels so fast in the manga, like lightning fast. The anime actually, slows it down and lets it breathe a little bit, if you can believe that, because the whole thing's very quick and fast-paced.
I think if I'd just gone into this like, oh, I'll watch this, see what it is, and I wasn't doing it for the show and everything, I probably wouldn't have got past the theme music. I probably got 20 seconds into that and like, this is not for me.
I love the theme music. And the subtitles.
And then like halfway through, the theme music changes and it becomes something like really hardcore metal.
That's what Japanese TV does, Alan.
I quite liked it that it changed. It became kind of darker. But that first start is like very... Plus, it's 90 seconds long intro.
Yeah.
Which is just brutally long, in like when you used to.
Oh yeah, and you get the full thing every time. It is very.
I mean, I was watching it on Netflix and it just skips it automatically. I was like, yeah, you just do that. That's fine.
I rewind and watch it every time.
I turn off the skipping option. I like getting that. Is it like a palette cleanser?
You can turn off the skipping option?
Yeah, you have to go into your account settings. But yeah, I need the opening sequence. It's like a palette cleanser. If you're binging a show, you need that.
Well, no, I'm all right. I'll quite happily pause it and just go and have a minute, like rather than listen to that.
I like getting the end credits as well. I don't like when they put the end credits.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the show. But with this one, I was quite happy. Because I was binging, I was quite happy to just get through it.
But yeah, you're right. The theme tune does change halfway through, and it becomes this death metal like. Like, I don't like the second one very much. I wish they just left it. The same exact thing happened with Attack on Titan. Like, I love the first theme tune, and then there's the second one that's just like, ugh. Yeah. I mean, they're just hallmarks of anime, from what I can gather. You get a
which
crazy...
is definitely something I'm not used to, so that was all kind of new to me. Can I ask one more thing of you guys, because I don't know anything about it, but in terms of the animation, the style, the quality?
Okay.
I think
It looks exactly like all anime.
Well, it does. But I think it's quite nice for TV animation, certainly for anime. Yeah, I quite like it, actually. And you know what? The character designs, while all the humans look like every other human in every other anime, you've got these, like, Shingami things and just things like that are quite distinct. And to be honest, even in this, like, the character design is, whilst the broad strokes used to draw everyone is much the same, they're distinct in their appearance and personality enough to make up for it. So
they do manage to distinguish them.
So L is hunched and weird looking, and he's got enough personality about him to compensate for the fact that it isn't necessarily the most innovative way of drawing people. So yeah, overall I think it's quite high quality animation for what it is.
I think it's really nice. I think it's of its era. I think you can certainly tell that this is a mid-2000s. You can tell that this is from, because it's coloured digitally, I would imagine, and this is when a lot of shows that were traditionally cel-drawn and hand-painted were moving over to digital painting, and it just has a certain quality about it. I'm not quite sure what it is that cartoons of this era have, but I don't know if it's the grading or what it is. You can tell it's of the era, but I think it's very nice. Obviously, the animation is minimal, but then so much of it is exposition. Like, half of every episode is just people talking exposition anyway. So, Sol, can you tell us a little bit about the live-action features?
Before I get onto those, there's 2 TV movie sequels, kind of this series. Alan, you might like them, actually. I don't know, but
well, animated.
Yeah, but don't get excited, because I watched one of them and it was such a waste of time. I was really angry, and I haven't even bothered the second one, because what they've done, and I don't know if this is like a typical Japanese thing, they have edited down the entire series into a couple of TV movies. And then there's like a book. Basically, you open in Shingami World, and Ryuk's there, and he's like, "Oh yeah, like this thing happened to me once. Let me tell you about it." And then it's just the entire series edited down into like 90 minutes. And Alan, you've seen the show, so you'll be aware that it is there is a point halfway through that is very much right end of part 1, start of part 2.
Yeah.
And so that's it. It's bizarre. It's just the biggest waste of time. I don't know why they did it.
Well, there's no new material in it.
No, it's just there's about 2 or 3 minutes of bookend that's new, and then everything is just a re-edit of the series into a movie. But you might enjoy getting.
Well, I think that could probably be done. If you've watched the whole thing, you won't like it. But if you haven't watched it before, that might be a good way.
But the problem is, the show moves fast enough as it is. I couldn't objectively get a sense of how well it was working because I'd seen the show already, but I imagine it's too quick. I imagine it's just so lightning paced to like fly through the full series at that speed. But I mean, it's quite remarkable, really, that it made sense, that it even like held together as a coherent plot.
Well, yeah, I can believe it.
Anyway, so there are these weird little oddities that exist. I'm sure there's a nice little bit in the bookend that at the end of the first one that kind of justifies diehard fans watching it. But then I went and dug out the live action films, and I think I kind of made a mistake of watching these immediately after I was done with the TV series. I was just so into it and enjoyed it so much. I was just looking for more content. And the problem is, it's so close. I mean, it's a live-action retelling of what you get in the manga, what you get in the anime. It's the same thing again, but with actors.
So it's just the same story.
Yeah, for the most part. It's very close. It does kind of go off on a bit of a tangent. It's just a story, but it only goes up to a certain point, and then it changes a few details so that becomes...
That's interesting because, well, I was thinking about that because that's what my pitch is kind of based on, which we'll come to in a minute. But yeah, like I said, I think this whole story would break down into 3 films. I can see that working. I can see where those chapter breaks will come.
It's 2 films that were shot back to back. It's quite common in Japan to make things this way. They were released in the same year. And they are parts 1 and 2 of the same story. They don't really work as separate entities, but they are very entertaining and, decent. But they don't come close to the quality of the anime by any stretch of the imagination. They're not as tightly plotted. The changes they make don't work as well, and the casting just isn't quite right. You've got these very specific designs of characters, and the actors just aren't really... I'm sure you could do them justice in live action with the right people, but the actors just are a bit lacking, to be honest. The guy who plays Light isn't particularly charismatic or anything like that.
Which is pretty crucial to the character, isn't it?
Yeah. The guy who plays L is clearly an attractive guy just doing a weird attempt at mimicking these awkward movements. It doesn't feel remotely natural. He's wearing like eyeliner in every shot as well. It just doesn't really work, and he's not the best like actor again. And just as a fan of the series, the woman playing Misa
Amane.
Yeah, Misa Amane is she's not blonde anymore. She's just a normal-looking Japanese woman, which obviously like isn't a problem. It's not relevant to the character, but
it makes her stand out.
And then you've got Ryuk, obviously, he's brought to life with CGI, and it's ropey 2006 Japanese CGI. So you know what to expect. It's a good job, all things considered, but. It's interesting though, because this came out 2006. That's the same year as the series. So I don't know. Japan was clearly being inundated with Death Note at the time.
Is this like the Ring films where they had like 3 out in 1 year or something like that? They
practically, yeah.
They just produce things super quickly.
They put 2 movies shot back to back out in the same year as the series. But like I said, the movies are quite conclusive. Those 2, but they wanted to continue the franchise, so they've had a bit of an awkward time since that. I understand they did a musical at one point that I don't really know anything about, and things like that.
Wow.
But then in 2008, so basically as soon as they could put another film into production, I guess, they made a really awkward 3rd film, which is arguably more of a spin-off. It's called L Change the World. It's basically just an entire film about L, but it's not really related to anything Death Note. It's about some plot involving a virus and he has to stop this evil organization from releasing this virus in the world. So it's just like
another case. Here's a detective, the detective is doing another case.
But the problem is it's not... Like, the Death Note is such an incredibly interesting concept to just give us to play with. The idea of terrorists with a virus, well, it's not. It's something I've seen in a million other films. You don't have that intimate game of chess between the character and the people that he's chasing, It's just not quite the same.
These terrorists, like, what form do they take? Are they like a cult kind of thing?
Kind of, yeah. It's basically someone who believes that like the planet would benefit from humanity being wiped out and wants to like speed up our inevitable destruction. It's that sort of generic bullshit.
Because there was quite a famous terrorist attack in Japan where this sort of cult, religious cult, they released.
Really?
What was it, like ricin or something like that on the subway system and killed some people, injured loads of others. That was in the 90s. So that's like a big cultural known thing that they may have been playing off of there.
bet they were, thinking about it. Yeah, there's all sorts of footage of people like in a little village at the start, and they keep going back to it, just kind of dying of this virus, and they're just kind of like spluttering on the ground. It's not quite as sci-fi as you'd probably get in an American film. That's interesting. I didn't realize that. But yeah, it's not a great film, this one. The budget feels severely lower. There's some really tenuous links to Death Note and cameos that don't add anything. Ryuk pops up like for one scene near the start just to kind of say, hey, what you doing? How you doing? And he's like, oh yeah, just
It's like when Jazzy Jeff turns up.
Yeah,
everyone applauds.
and he popped up, and I thought, oh okay, they're going to tie this into the films more than I thought. And that was his one scene in and out. So I watched this last night, and I thought, fuck's sake. And I still had the fourth one that came out last year to watch, and I wasn't looking forward to it. So I was really surprised actually by how much I enjoyed the fourth one, because the fourth one, I should add, it's not been getting the best reviews. It's rated lower than the third one on IMDb, but for my money, it might well be the best one of the four, because the fourth one is it's back to Death Note. It's more Death Note like the first two, but it's telling a new story that I hadn't already seen. It's an extension of the story in the anime and the first two films. And that's not to say it's perfect. There's a lot of contrived bullshit in it. There's a character who is literally the clone of L, who is almost exactly like L in every way, but inexplicably played by a completely different actor. But that's to the film's strength, because I quite like this actor, and I think his performance is better than the guy they cast as L. He doesn't play it like L, he plays it like some other kind of Jesse Eisenberg chewing the scenery or something like that. He plays it in a far more quirky, nerd, intense way, but it doesn't feel as artificial and like they're emulating something they can't quite do. And there's a whole new load of Shingami in this one that I hadn't seen before, and that was really nice. These really cool designs. There's one who, like Calvin, if you think Ryuk's scary, there's a Shingami at the start of this film who is genuinely terrifying to look at. And the CGI is pretty impressive, all things considered. The idea is a whole load of Death Notes have come to Earth, and they've got to, retrieve them for the government and make sure they don't fall into bad hands and what have you. The film opens with a kind of standalone vignette almost. But yeah, the film opens in Russia, and there's a doctor going to a cabin out in the snow, this remote cabin, and the Death Note falls from the sky, and he sort of, it's the same exact thing we had with Light, and then he goes in and he's seeing this man who's terminally ill, and the man is basically begging him to help him, assist him committing suicide, like, help me die, I don't want to live with this illness anymore. And so on a whim, the doctor kind of writes his name in this book that he's found, not thinking it'll work, and is able to basically help this guy die in a way that won't be traced back to him. And that's his turning point, where he realizes that the book is for real. And it's just this kind of pre-credit sequence that is just setting up that these books are falling to Earth and being picked up by people who are doing different things with them, and it loosely ties in later on. But like I said, the bulk of the plot is a sort of copycat descendant of Light and the clone of L duking it out. And once you get past how stupid and contrived that is, it's basically just more Death Note, which I really enjoyed. And there's just a whole load of great sequences in it. Very near the start of the film, there is a girl who's found the Death Note, one of the 6, and she's just walking through a packed street. She's taken the Shingami Eyes deal so she can see everyone's name. She's just walking through the street, killing people at random, and it's played like a mass shooting or a terrorist attack or something. It's people running away terrified, chaos, and these agents kind of rushing to get to her to stop it. And it's things like that I just found very interesting, very well done. My only real complaint with the film, to be honest, is that it's too long. It massively outstayed its welcome. It didn't need to be that long. But yeah, there's just loads of like glimpses at new Shingami things and different people who pick up the book and do different things with it, and all sorts of new Machiavellian what have you, and a few characters from the first one do come back who survived, and it's just done very well, I thought. Despite its many flaws, very, very enjoyable on a kind of pulpy level.
Okay.
I'd recommend watching those 3 live-action films if you are a fan of the series, but certainly the anime is the thing to watch if you're going to get into it. There's actually a mini-series as well that led into that 4th film, following like the 3 main characters in it, but I didn't watch that. And it didn't hinder my enjoyment of the film not having seen it, so I don't think it's very important. But
so that brings us up to now, and Netflix are doing a film version of it, a US adaptation.
Well, this was originally over at Warner Brothers, and it was a victim of Batman v Superman being shit. Warner Brothers axed a whole load of kind of mid-level, not particularly expensive projects that weren't set to return huge blockbuster numbers either, because they felt they were too, just not worth their efforts. For whatever reason, the failure, or comparative failure, I should say, relative failure of Batman v Superman in terms of money made them double down on making huge blockbusters and putting all of their eggs into one basket, even though that's surely the opposite thing that you should do when a film like that doesn't return the investment as much as you were hoping. And yeah, like I say, one of the films that they axed altogether that was in pre-production was Death Note, the American remake. Netflix then came in and were like, yeah, we'll have it. And it's out this week. And you can go and watch it after you listen, or maybe in a few days. I don't know.
Well, essentially, my pitch is what I think this remake is going to be.
Okay.
So we can incorporate it into the discussion of, your
yeah,
thoughts.
I've got some ideas about this, and I'm hoping they do a good job with it. But
well, you can add in then. We can make my pitch more of a kind of discussion element, if you want, because basically what I decided to do with my pitch...
Just a few points that I'll get to, and if this is touching on your pitch, then stop me and I'll save it. But point number 1, this is yet another film in a long line of films lately that is being very heavily criticised for perceived whitewashing. They have... Well, they're Japanese protagonists. The main characters, they're all Japanese in the original manga and the anime. And they've cast white American people in the lead roles of this film. And they're being criticised for that. But it is a film set in America.
It's an American remake of the thing.
Adaptation. So
yeah,
my feelings are that it's not really a problem. I mean, there's an argument to be had for diversity. Like, why couldn't they be Asian anyway, or black or whatever? But at the same time, that it's not like.
And one of the characters is black.
Yeah, true.
Character of Light appears, not Light, of L appears to be
L
a black
is
guy.
Black. Sorry, yeah. He is.
So that, but yeah, I mean, I don't think I can see when the big kerfuffle over Ghost in the Shell is more because it was still set in Tokyo, albeit futuristic, and so there was that sort of element of it. But this is just a straight American remake. It's like saying Naomi Watts isn't Japanese enough in the ring. It's just
and that's
meaningless.
And that's it. I just think it's a really stupid complaint to have. I mean, there's certainly an argument to be had for the fact that they don't appear to be Americanizing it enough. One of the elements in the original manga and everything is that the Light is given the name of Kira by the media and everyone. They refer to this entity that's murdering everyone as Kira. And that is a Japanese play on the fact that traditionally Japanese people struggle to pronounce their R's and L's. It's a Japanese person saying, oh, well, we'd call him Killer, but we'd struggle to pronounce it, and therefore I'm going to go with Kira as the nickname that is adopted. So the fact that they appear to be calling him Kira in the American remake, for example, is stupid. But I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe it's justified in some capacity in the film.
Okay, so my pitch, something we don't really do often on this show, is that I'm actually going to pitch a sincere, a sequel, not sequel, a sincere adaptation of this thing.
Can I make one note quickly about the remake coming out as well? Willem Dafoe is playing Ryuk, and I think that's beautiful casting.
I think it could be if he used his face.
Oh yeah, I'm hoping it's a good bit of motion capture. And yeah.
well, my pitch, what I've got to work with. I'm not going to pitch my own idea for a sequel. I'm not going to pitch my own idea for this adaptation. I'm going to pitch what I think we're actually going to get.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to put the kind of American adaptation idea onto it. All I've got to go on is the trailer, which I've watched. There's not really spoilers in this. I'll try and keep anything too specific out because I've changed certain details of what happens in the anime series and things like that. So don't worry too much about spoilers because you won't know kind of what I've changed and what I haven't. Because what I've done is tried to create a film of just certain elements of this story. So rather than try and adapt the whole thing, which I think is too long, I've just picked out certain elements of it, changed certain elements to make that work. But I'm also trying to predict what they will change for an American audience. Yeah. But I must admit, and having seen the sequel, having seen the trailer, they're going more down that road than I expected them to. And I think
more of a straight up
more
adaptation.
They've kept more elements than I expected. Not shot for shot necessarily, but the story elements.
It looks incredibly close to the original, and then they'll just, in the trailer, there's just, for example, a shot of a massive Ferris wheel, like, blowing up and things like that. They're like, oh, I don't remember that in the...
That's not good. But I think they're going to have to make it more action-oriented, like, and put more actual cinematic action into it, yeah. But I think also one of the main things they're going to change... But, they may have gone further down that road because this is Netflix, rather than a big film studio going for a big theatrical release. What do you think? Do you think they've got a bit more freedom? Or maybe a bit more
but at the same
they can
time,
play with it?
Well, as far as I'm aware, Netflix just picked up the distribution rights. The film was kind of
so they haven't changed
being made anyway.
Yeah, I think Netflix just swept
It's
in.
not a Netflix production, it's just their distributing
Well, I think the film was happening and it got dropped, and without someone coming in to fund it, it would have just been cancelled. So I think Netflix just came in and put the money in. So I think in some capacity it is a production of theirs insofar as they are putting money into it. But
I know what you're saying though. They haven't particularly influenced the story.
Yeah. I doubt they had much of an opportunity to give notes on it and change what was happening. They just essentially bought it.
One of the things I expected them to play down, which it doesn't look like they are in the trailer, is this whole messianic complex thing where Light kind of wants to change the world and become a kind of a god of a new world. There's definitely cultish elements in that trailer, isn't there?
If anything, it looks like they're going the opposite direction and making a bigger deal of it than they did in the...
Which I wasn't really expecting that, because the Americans are a bit funny about God. Like, they kind of believe in it and all that. So it's... and like the Japanese culture is different because there's like lots of gods, and it's kind of... there's gods of death and that sort of thing. It's slightly different. And so I didn't expect that to play quite as strongly. And with this whole cult thing of them following Kira and the justice of Kira and all that sort of thing. So anyway, I've tried to incorporate that. One of the main changes will be Light. I think he's not going to be a kind of super smart, sexy teenager. He's obviously a teenager, but I think he's going to be a bit more down to earth, a bit more of he's more interested in, but he's really interested in justice. Like, you see him beating up some bullies or trying to beat up some bullies in the trailer. Like, he's interested in justice and standing up for the little man rather than being
I think you're right
smart,
there.
I'm going to change the world kind of thing. Like in the original, Light is like top of his class, and he's obviously like really intelligent, and that's really well respected. But Americans, they don't really respect intelligence in the same way. So he's got to be more of a kind of... In America, it's more about like how hard you work for something rather than being naturally gifted. So I think he's got to have this sense of justice rather than intelligence. And L, from what we see in the trailer, is certainly not quite as quirky and autistic as
L
he
just
is in the
seems
anime.
kind of suave in this one. He's a lot
Yeah,
more like
he does, doesn't
cool and less weird and creepy.
And exactly, which I'm not sure quite how that's
It's kind of like
work.
they've swapped his creepiness with the main guy, actually, thinking about it. They've sort of reversed the two round.
The other major difference that I can... he's got this female sidekick, which you may not have come to this quite yet, Calvin, but there is a female character that comes into it who does sort of play a sidekick kind of role. She's clearly very prominent in this. That's going to be a big part of my plot idea.
Well, she's very prominent in the overall story of the thing. It's just that they take a few episodes before they get to her in the series. But even the live action film gets to her a lot quicker.
Not just more prominent, I think she's going to be more active, more proactive. I think I'm going to make her more elemental to what actually happens. And it's crucial to how I'm going to end the film. So I think we're definitely going to see when he's killing people, they're going to be really clearly bad people. I think we're going to be very clear about who he's killing. And then it'll only become later when we start asking more questions about who is killing and why.
Well,
like that kind of that
true
moral
of
grey area.
That's true of the original as well.
Yeah, I think it will really hammer it home. But I'm talking specifically for Light here, because I think that the girl is going to be the one who starts to push things too far for him. Once Light starts having moral doubts about what's going on, and he's swayed by this girl, I think they're going to end up in like some kind of relationship. So that's going to be like a whole kind of love thing. I think she's going to be the one who gets the messianic complex and starts getting out of control. Then when the Light character realizes all this, he's going to decide he needs to stop her as well.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So like, basically what I'm trying to do is turn Light from this anti-hero into what will essentially be a hero kind of character. Like he's going to come good at the end almost. So I think we'll have a bit where the conclusion will be Light manages to make it look like everything that was suspicious about him, that Elle thought he was up to this, Elle thought he was doing this, was actually because it was all his girlfriend and she was setting it up to look like him, or it just made it connected to him. But she's still out there killing people. And then some sort of contrivance, Light and Elle work together to capture her. And then when they're about to catch her, she will die in some sort of way, which looks like an accident, but we don't, and we just assume it is an accident at the time, like she falls off a building or whatever. The deaths stop, the case is solved, everyone goes about their business, and that's it. That's kind of your happy ending sort of thing. But then Light, he finds the death note there, like he's hidden it there previously. And then that's when we kind of get the flashbacks that show that this was his plan all along, and he did all this deliberately to set up the girl as the sole culprit. But then he would ultimately come back to owning the book and have the power again.
We'll see, I guess.
But do you think, my other sort of major prediction, that this will end with the potential for a sequel? That's why I don't think we'll get to... I don't think we'll get to the completion of the anime series, like the kind of the ending that comes at that, because I think they'll want to get another film out of this, if not 2 more films.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there. I think they'll definitely leave the option there for future films, certainly. But the other thing is this film is being directed by Adam Wingard, who we haven't mentioned yet, but I think he's quite an interesting pick. He is a horror director. He has made low-budget, gritty horror films and a few thrillers. His work isn't that highly regarded on the whole, but I quite like everything I've seen from him so far. One of his very early efforts, I think it was his 3rd film, but was made on absolute peanuts. I think it was funded by the website bloodydisgusting.com. It was called A Horrible Way to Die, and it's a little thriller, and I saw it at Leeds Film Festival back in 2010 or something, and I thought it was a really solid bit of work. The characterization was all there. It was very impressive for such a low budget effort, and it's incredibly low budget, but it's not particularly highly regarded. He directed stuff in the VHS movies, if you've seen them. I'm not a massive fan of those. And then more recently, last year, he directed Blair Witch, the sequel to the Blair Witch Project, which was also very badly received, but I happen to think was brilliant. I really clicked with it, personally. I'm quite interested to see what he does with it. I'm quite on board with him as a creative, and I hope he proves to have vision and be a good director. I wouldn't be surprised if he does take it to quite dark places, given his track record. But at the same time, this seems to be his stepping stone into the mainstream at the minute. He's just been hired to do Godzilla versus King Kong, for example. So they're obviously setting him up to be a big blockbuster guy going forward. I don't know. Yeah, I think it could go either way.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what they do with it. It's going to be an interesting one to watch, whether it turns out any good or not.
Yeah.
All right then, Saul. Well, how would you do an adaptation of Death Note, or a sequel, maybe?
I think the best thing you could possibly do with this franchise, in terms of sequels, at this point, is to just kind of take the broad concept, the idea of a book that can kill anyone, and transplant it to new places, new characters, and just kind of see how different people deal with it. Because it was given to very specific characters in the original manga, the original anime. And I came up with a broad idea of what to do with it, and watching the fourth film last night has really cemented in my head that this is the way to go. I thought that opening moment, that opening scene with the Doctor and Russia was brilliant. There were all sorts of other sequences where you saw that there was a stockbroker who'd been using the Death Note to like manipulate stock prices. I really liked seeing just different characters and how they play with it and use, the things in different ways. So my idea is same exact thing. Shingami chucks a book down for a laugh to see what happens. He chucks it down, or she chucks it down, to medieval England. I haven't been able to figure out the ins and outs of this particularly in much detail. It's just a good idea of the sort of thing I would do with a sequel. So I'd have it be a feudal peasant, son of the head farmer on this whack of land, stumbling upon the book after toiling in the fields. Say his pitchfork breaks or something, and he goes to the tool keep or whatever, sees the book fall from the skies and retrieves it to examine later that night. He's coming from a Yeoman family, so he's reasonably literate for the time. I did a bit of research into this. And
how literate is that then?
Well, your middle classes could generally read and write. There was a good percentage of people, certainly, that could read and write. So in the sort of 17th century we're talking. Yeah, he might struggle with the bigger words, but he can certainly read the rules of the book, And they're in English, so he'll be alright, because he's English. So yeah, that night he waits for the younger members of the family to go to bed, the elder family members going off to the local public house for the evening, and feigns illness, takes to reading the book by candlelight. Soon a kind of righteous plague strikes the town, taking down those perceived to be wicked. Seemingly no one can predict exactly what sort of actions count or don't count as wickedness, as even some of the higher officials of the church are being struck down and what have you. And eventually the town bring in a witch smeller. So that's your basic setup there. You've got a witch smeller who is essentially going to be our L, coming to look for the origins of this plague.
I like this, yeah. It's putting it into a different context, a different time, and it is like it's experienced in a different way because it's through a different religious view, or
exactly.
Witchcraft and that sort of thing. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean that's it really. The witch smeller comes in wearing a mask, so you can't see his face. One of those witch nose mask things.
Yeah,
plague masks. I don't know. I mean, like you say, I just think. I think it's such a great concept that there is real life to be had just in seeing it play out in different scenarios. I feel like the characters we've seen, their story's done and dusted, and I don't need convoluted, contrived clones of characters and their descendants to continue the story. I don't need any of that at all. Just let's see how it would play if the book landed in ancient Egypt or the future or the Middle East or something, just anywhere. And I just landed on medieval England because why not? There you go. That's my pitch.
Wouldn't it be really hard to actually write someone's name in? Because people didn't have surnames in those days, did they?
Well, you don't need it. You just need their name and visualize their face.
What happens if you don't have a name? Or a face, for that matter?
Yeah.
We have to visualize the stump of their neck, I assume.
What if you're, like, Nicolas Cage and you put on John Travolta's face? And they know your name, but they don't have your face. Does John Travolta die?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at John Travolta's face and you use the name John Travolta, would he die?
You'd have to use John Travolta's name.
Yeah, but if you saw him as John Travolta, you'd go, oh, that's John Travolta, I'll do that. But then it's actually Nicolas Cage.
But if you wrote Nicolas Cage, he'd be alright anyway, because he's Nicholas Coppola or something, isn't he? What's his name?
Yeah, Nicholas Coppola.
Oh.
So, but what happens if you legally change your name? Is that the name that the book needs, or is it your birth name? If someone finds out what your name is, can you then just, like, go down to the town hall and legally change it and not tell anyone what it is? Will you be safe?
Well,
then?
yeah, I mean, but yeah, what if say you get married and you change your name through that can? Because I mean, your birth name, you haven't really got a birth name, have you? It's just what you're given anyway. It's all made up at the end of the day. I mean, I've got at least 3 different names.
Yeah, that's the point. They'd have a right old time trying to kill you with a death note.
Yeah, what if you have plastic surgery and it changes your look completely?
Well, that's what I'm saying. What if a chimpanzee rips off your face and then...
What if you just what if you look more or less the same, but you just get really fat and they've only seen you a few years ago and you were still thin, so they're visualizing the wrong version of your face? Does that count?
I've had my teeth done. Do you think that's changed? Anyway, can I get on with my pitch? Mine is you're probably going to get an idea of what it's going to be from the title. It's called Sex Note.
Oh, God.
And
Jesus Christ.
it is an American comedy about a teenage boy in high school in America called Tom who finds a sex note and discovers that he can have sex with whoever he wants so long as he has their name and can picture their face and is within the immediate vicinity of them within 44 minutes. Rules are, much like the Death Note, you can write in any sexual act and a person will perform it within 44 minutes. The person has no memory of what they did from the point they are possessed until they've climaxed. So... just like in real life, eh?
This is Bill Cosby Presents Sex Note.
Yeah. So our teen boy, and he's called Tom because I'm hoping that Tom Holland will play him.
God.
And obviously
I would advise against that as his agent.
And obviously he needs a sidekick, a Shinigami, if you will. So I picked a famous person. Can you guess who it is who I would have picked as a sort of slightly demented god of sex?
Christopher Walken.
Was it a god of sex? Hugh Hefner?
Nope.
Werner Herzog.
They're not alive. They're not alive.
Is Hugh Hefner still alive?
Yes.
Jesus.
George A. Romero. Martin Landau.
No.
Not alive.
Not
Hugh
B.
Hefner.
Arthur.
We've covered a film starring this person.
James Stewart.
Sex? Sex? Elvis? Sex god?
Well, no. I mean, you're probably thinking a bit too much. I think sex god is not the right... Okay, it's Divine. I picked Divine.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Because that is
That
someone
makes
who... Divine from Pink Flamingos, the drag queen, because he's someone who... He would play that role of he'd be really bored with his life, because it's like, oh, I've seen everything, I've seen all the filthy stuff,
Yeah,
I've seen
definitely.
all the height of depravity, who would hang around and then be curious to know what this young lad would get up to with his sex book. So, the pair of them embark on hilarious sexcapades around town. Divine overcomes his boredom and complacency by
Can
seeing...
you dictate who the person performs the act with? Or is it just whoever's
Yes.
in their immediate vicinity?
Well, I mean, it depends on who is in their immediate vicinity, but you can pick
It doesn't have to be
people
you,
within
it can be anyone. Is that right?
Yeah, all themselves.
Also, that's a weird... So you can do like a really weird, like, masturbatory bondage thing where you, like, force yourself
Yes.
to do something that you don't want to do, and...
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a bit rapey,
It
really,
is a
isn't
bit,
it? But then...
What, has that only just occurred to you?
I suppose because I sort of picture this as a comedy, and then it sort of feels a bit darker than that now.
Yeah.
I'd argue this plays darker than the actual thing about killing people.
It does, doesn't it? And I wonder what that says about our society.
You could probably made this film 20 years ago, but not now. Post American Pie, you'd probably get away with something.
20. That's what I had in mind. I had American Pie and the Wayans brothers in mind, but now I don't think you could.
I'm not even sure if American Pie era would work. I think you'd have to go back to Revenge of the Nerds, Animal House era, to Porky's.
Yeah, maybe if you had a note that made a girl's tits bigger, you could get away with that. You can make them go up 2 cup sizes and shirt buttons pop off.
Carry on, Death Note.
Anyway, the last thing about mine is that there's a series arc in that, because obviously there needs to be an antagonist for Tom and Divine, and there's a team of really pissed off nuns after him, and they're trying to track him down and destroy the sex book, and that's our continuing thread through the thing. I'd quite like Jessica Lange to play one of the nuns.
Yeah, I can see that.
What about
Larry David?
Oh, perfect. Yep, there we go. Yeah, that's it. I mean, that would help with the comedy angle of my pitch, wouldn't it?
What about Eric Idle and Robbie Coltrane?
Oh, God.
As nuns. Perfect. Yeah.
So, if either of you guys, if a Death Note landed in your lap, what would you do with it?
Moira Hindley.
So you'd use it? Because I mean, the question wasn't who would you kill.
Right.
Would you toy with the?
So Calvin, you'd use it to kill someone who's already who's already dead actually, but
she is
been dead for many years, but also was being punished for the crime she committed and was in prison where she was no harm to anyone anymore. That's who you decided you needed to punish.
No, I think I'd keep it somewhere just to know that no one else could use it.
Look at him backpedaling now.
We all know Calvin would be away with it. Calvin would just be sat watching the question time, and every time someone annoyed him, he'd just be writing the name down. Audience members who ask silly questions, right?
I'd be watching RuPaul's Drag Race, can't stand that bitch.
Can't stand rosy cheeks.
What about you, Alan?
I don't know. I don't know if I want to get involved. Feels like there'd be consequences down the line that I wasn't aware of. Do you know what I mean?
So it's just that so you wouldn't do it because you're scared of getting in trouble.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I'd be sensible about it. I wouldn't go on a massive killing spree
No, I might go on a massive killing spree. I bet I would eventually. I'd probably hold off for a bit and then go, do you know what? Fucking, how long do I have to wait behind you to use this cash machine, you fucking dickhead? Right? Anybody who takes more than 40 seconds to use a cash machine, dead.
I think Alan would use it on himself, first week.
Ultimately, yeah. Anyone who wears flip-flops in a city centre, dead. Who else? Oh, anyone who describes himself as not religious but spiritual.
Oh God, yeah,
they'd be dead. Who else? Who do you hate, Sol?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't wish death upon them, but anyone who likes
but you would though. You get power hungry ultimately.
Yeah, modern Simpsons viewers there.
All right. What if it wasn't? Let's say it's a Death Note, but it's it's just.
It makes you shit yourself. Shit your pants in public.
It just performs some sort of act of mild inconvenience for you.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Shit yourself in public. No. Most politicians probably.
The thing is, if you do it to loads of people, then it'll lose its power because it'll be like, oh, that's the thing that's going around at the moment.
Yeah, you're right. Actually,
bug, some sort of virus.
I might just pick one person like Katie Hopkins, but just keep doing it every time she goes anywhere in public. Though if you did it enough, she'd probably die of dehydration or something. So maybe not. I don't want to kill anyone.
Does pooing dehydrate you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There we go. Christ. just chill out with the Shingami. That's what I'd do. I'd be so fascinated by the Shingami that I'd just be like trying to.
No, it's
I'd
scary.
be doing science experiments on them, trying to figure out how they work, Calvin. Trying to like photograph them and stuff, prove they exist to the rest of the world. Like if you touch a camera to a Death Note, does it photograph the Shingami? Magic in it doesn't make sense.
Well, I think there's an end point in there somewhere.
Well, there you go. Hope you enjoyed that as ever. Come back next week when we swap from highbrow Japanese animation to considerably more lowbrow American animation.